Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Welcome to Derry. Episode 5 is now here, and it's packed with Easter eggs, big reveals, and lots of nuts to the book. We watch as our characters descend below Derry, and it unearths something more than just Pennywise. As they say, pride always comes before a fall. There's some big lordums here that explain the past massacres, and also twist upon twist upon twist upon twist, so let's stop messing around and just dive into the episode.
Duck and cover, kiddos.
Okay, so we pick up right where last week's episode ended. Dick had entered Daniel's mind and found out a lot of truth around Derry. This included what the creature was, along with the 13 MacGuffins on how to contain it. As we've seen though, it can go beyond these barriers, which we'll talk about more in a bit because I have a bit of a theory on it. Dick is where we last left him though, with his index finger placed firmly on his third eye.
Matron.
This is a finger that's supposed to denote power and fortitude, and being pressed against the area of the mind is thought to play into one's sixth sense and make use of you have psychic powers, you subscribe. Now across the table we see Daniel's having a very bad time and foaming from the mouth. This echoes a moment from the Shining movie and is such a good callback. That happened when Jack Torrance entered room 237 and Danny went into a seizure while his dad hooked up with the sexy bath ghost lady. This was so strong Dick picked it up as well and then went into a trance himself. This is what made him travel to the Overlook, and it's nice having the mission that he had there sort of tying into how he has a mission here. Great Easter eggs all around. Here we have Dick now knowing where the totems are though, and this sets up things for the rest of the episode. In going down in the sewers, he gets a vision of his grandpa who threatens to open up his spiritual box. This is something Dick also told Danny about in Dr. Sleep, and it was a way to trap evil spirits. However, in bringing it across to here as well, it sets up a very interesting parallel. That spirit wants to use the ghosts in his box as they're so powerful, and this is something Shaw's also trying to do with Pennywise. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but we do know that the army doesn't get the creature. Spoiler alert there. Whether that's down to them failing or Shaw having a change of heart and actually listening to Rose, we don't know yet. But yeah, there is a possibility that he leaves it where it is. But we will break down that scene when we get to it. Cutting to Marge, we then see the aftermath of her vision last week. Her vision, eh? No pun intended there. Lily's come to see her while her parents are out of the room and she's getting seen to by the nurse. At this point, everyone thinks she did the massacre and also attacked Marge in the class. But Marge has covered for her, and we learn that she told people Lilly was trying to help when her glasses broke. Should have gone to Specsavers, love. Throughout the episode though, she basically goes back to her old friend.
You won't be alone.
It only took a cosmic horror vision to reunite the two friends, yay! At the standpipe, we also get another reunion as well, well, sort of. Yes, Matty has seemingly returned, but as we learn, it was all a trick by Pennywise. However, they do a great bit of writing to make you think it's really him. The losers coming together to defeat the creature is a motif we expect, so by having him appear at the standpipe, it's such a clever way to play on our expectations.
Help me.
That takes us to the intro itself, and we're going to break it all down in just a bit, but firstly, a quick word from our sponsors. Have you ever had a file, movie, or photo disappear from the cloud just when you need it? It feels like your data's got a villain of its own. However, there is a solution, and the Augury NAS DH2300 is how you finally take control. It's your own private home cloud, and all your files are safely stored locally instead of relying on expensive cloud plans. And with up to 60 terabytes of space, you can store around 40,000 movies, 20 million pictures, or 62 million files. All accessible anytime, anywhere. And Augury NAS offers wide compatibility for third-party HDDs. You can connect quickly via NFC, tap the NAS and use the NFC to log in. There's also multi-user sharing, so your family or anyone you work with can easily access what they need anywhere on Earth. Within reason, you can stream 4K videos straight to your TV, laptop or phone and manage files from anywhere. Now, I have had stuff in the past where we've shot stuff out on the road, made it look amazing, and then got home to realise the card or camera's been damaged and we've lost everything we filmed. With this, I can just back it up when I'm out and about and not waste an entire day filming. Plus, it's super easy to set up. All you need to do is screw the drives in place and then drop the trace into the device. You can also classify albums effortlessly. Augury NAS has built-in AI smart recognition and classification function. It can intelligently identify and classify albums of people, places, animals, etc. and it can recognize all your similar photos and organize them effortlessly. And if you're worried about safety, it's actually protected with advanced RAID redundancy. So even if one drive fails, your data backs up automatically to the second one and it all stays secure. Check the link in the description to grab 20% off during their Black Friday sales, which runs from the 20th of November till the 1st of December. Augury NAS DH2300, take control of your data, keep it safe and make it yours. Just click my link in the description, get that 20% off and check out this amazing new storage system. Thanks. Now, in our first clue that something is off, we see is a tense portrait at a Dutch angle, which is typically shorthand for something being wrong. As we zoom in, there's also a little bit of wind there. It's similar to how Pennywise often reveals itself to people, and it's what happened when Henry received the knife in chapter 1. He also says how Pennywise sleeps during the day, which does feel very fairy tale-esque. However, if you've paid attention to any of Pennywise's attacks, mate, then you'll know that isn't the case. Georgie, who's like, that has to be up there as being like one of the most famous deaths in horror. He was, of course, grabbed during daytime. We also had stuff like the Paul Bunyan statue attack on Richie, it going for Stan as the painting lady, so on and so forth. Attacking Ben at the library. All things that happen in the day, the list goes on. Even Marge had her attack last week during the school day, so something about this story isn't checking out, mate.
Bullshit.
However, I liked how the creative team figured out what people would theorize about and then decided to lean into that and then put another twist on top of it. There has been a theory since episode 2 that Phil and Maddie are still alive, which we did see back in episode 2. As many of you pointed out, when Lilly saw the cereal boxes, Teddy and Susie's faces were decomposing. However, Phil and Maddie's faces were normal. So many people thought, including me, that those two actors were still alive. However, as we see, they're very much dead. You got me, you son of a bitch, Muschetti, you bloody got me.
I will remember you.
I also appreciate that the tent was yellow, much like the pacifier he sucked in episode 1. But it didn't suck it in this one, mate, because it's bloody Pennywise. Matty then tells a tale of how he was down there and kinda got stuck in the monster's lair. He says he made a break and escaped the labyrinth, and it reminds me of the Bogeyman, which is a folklore tale that varies from country to country. Stephen King even wrote a short story that had the Bogeyman as the villain, which was titled The Bogeyman. The novel also features a small fairy tale door which leads directly to the creature's lair. Along with that, King was also inspired by the folktale Three Billy Goats Gruff when coming up with it. The story involves a troll living under a bridge, and King took this and changed it to a creature that lived in the sewers. In hindsight, when you're rewatching this scene, you'll notice Matty saying stuff like, I dragged Teddy down there and I held Susie as she bled to death. And yeah, knowing that it's the creature talking, it plays into what Matty says completely differently. As Matty tells the tale, we can also hear Susie's cries over the top, and he says that Phil is still alive. Matty also says no cops, like some gangster, and he says he'd rather go back to the sewers than back to his horrible home life. Which yeah, when I was hearing that, I was like, would you though, mate? Like, would you? I mean, I don't know how bad it was. It must have been bad because he ran away, but I don't know if your home life would have been worse than an interdimensional clown that terrifies you until you taste good enough for it to eat, and psychically enters your mind and plagues you with lots of visions, probably including your dad, which it tortures you with. Probably that as well. But yeah, I remember I had to watch Screen Crush once, and I'd rather live in the sewers with Pennywise than go back to that, mate. In hindsight, though, this is Pennywise. I love Ryan and Colton, really. I'm just every weekend like, what's your beef with Screen Crush? I'm good friends with them. I was texting them before. Texting them saying you were a fucking dickhead, but I was texting them still. We're in contact, we're friends.
Shut the f*** up, Ryan Airy.
In hindsight, though, this is Pennywise trying to make sure they don't go to the adults or have someone outside the group come face to face with Maddie. If they took Maddie to the police station, then Pennywise might have to reveal itself or keep up with the act. Instead, its plans to take them to the sewers. Once again, it fits in with the themes of abuse and childhood trauma that litter the book. The clown also spies on its prey before making its move, and it uses one's worst fear to terrorize its victims. Thus, it saw inside Maddie's head and came up with a story so it could make it believable, especially as it's a known fact that, yeah, his home life's terrible again. Like even Hank was mentioning that in episode 1, so yeah, it was clearly known about the town. Ronnie then wants what she thinks is Maddie to show the police that he's alive, as it will exonerate her dad. I feel that Hank is integral to the Black Spot fire though, so this is also why Maddie says no to going to the police. We will talk about that more in the spoiler section at the end, in case you've been avoiding the trailers, but we also have a breakdown of the mid-season trailer going over some of the teasers that go beyond this entry, and clearly spoil what's going to happen. but more on that in just a bit. What do you mean the channel's called Heavy Spoilers? I hope you weren't expecting spoilers, mate. In the meantime, we then journey to the base and see Shaw explaining the pillars. He talks about how what Pennywise fell to Earth in has now been shattered into 13 totems. We did wonder if Pennywise was actually in prison in this case and then it crashed to Earth by accident, kinda like the opening of The Thing. I feel like Shaw's trying to rationalise his plan, but Leroy is rightly pissed off he's been brought into this. Shaw then talks about the tribe, whose name I can't pronounce.
But the Scottawampscott tribe.
Cheers, mate, which translates to Tribe of Maturin. King's creation Maturin was actually based off Native American myths, and some believed that the world was actually on the back of a giant turtle. They theorized a great flood would come and wipe things out, and this was greatly tied to the notion of destruction. Every Pennywise cycle also brings with it a great flood. The storm comes down and opens up the sewers, which is when the creature awakens. Maturin was the opposite to Pennywise, and the tribe have dedicated their lives to keeping it locked up. But now the monster must be freed and weaponized to fight communism. We must destroy the commies, damn it. And yeah, all this shit, and Leroy's just wanted a quiet place to come and live, away from all the noise. It's bitterly ironic though that the most evil town in the USA is where he's moved to have a normal life. The safest place for them at the moment though is on the base, but considering the black spot's a major event in the cycle, don't think it's going to be that good for them. The children of Maturin mention that every cycle ends in a massacre, with this one being the fire at the black spot. The previous one was the Bradley Gang massacre, and the one before that was of course the Kitchener Ironworks, which we do know are going to be the plots of season 2 and 3 respectively. Shaw's plan is to get the totems though, round them up and reduce the size of the cage, which will help contain the creature. And it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Not a great plan.
They then look at a map of the city, and there's some really interesting places on this. Firstly, in the top left, we have a triangle which says Old Derry Airfield. I believe that this is where the airbase is, and it's outlined in a triangle. Below that we have Juniper Hill, and then to the right of that we have 217, which might be a nod to Room 217, which was the Overlook's heart in the book, whereas in the movie it's 237. Along from that's a War Memorial Park, and then right at the bottom we can see the Derry High School. To the right hand side we also have train tracks which border along the Kitchener Ironworks, which has been circled. Helpful that. This massacre of course happened in 1908, and we do know that Major Shaw was there during that time. Now we have seen a similar thing to this map before. During the slide scene in It Chapter 1, Bill brought this up. It's through this that he realised all the major disappearances and events were connected by the sewer system which runs under the town. This came together at 29 Neibolt Street, with that being the middle of everything, the epicenter. It also showed that the safe part of town was on the right hand side, which is where I'd live. Anyway, through that we can also see the Ironworks is right near where Georgie was grabbed, and that Shaw's also looking at it upside down as opposed to how Bill had it. But it kind of gives you a lay of the land. Bill also pointed out the well house, which is what Shaw says here too. Now he wants the guys to go in, contain the creature, and then says if you had it in a cage you could drop it on the enemies to save lives. Not a great fucking plan, mate. How are you going to get it back? Now, one thing I've forgotten to mention this season is just how much General Shaw reminds me of Twin Peaks, in that there's General Briggs, played by absolute legend Don S. Davis. He's running a US Air Force base that's actively hunting for paranormal activity, including the mysterious White Lodge. So he's similar to Shaw, but also Leroy, mainly due to Briggs also having troubles connecting to his son. Anyway, cutting to the children of Maturin, we learn the cycle of 62 has been milder than 35 and 08. However, there's still been losses. There's 25 disappearances and 7 confirmed deaths, with the victims ranging between 5 and 16. It's similar to Mike in Chapter 2, keeping an eye on the town and knowing the disappearances, which makes him realise it's come back. There's also a huge lore dump that explains how it can infect the town despite being trapped in the area of the Western Wood. We hear how it sheds, which has affected Derry's groundwater since the town was founded. This is why the citizens turn a blind eye to what it's doing and why the adults are so aggressive and horrible. This is something in the book that's known as the Derry Curse, and it caused the adults to become completely apathetic and angry. I did always kind of wonder, why it took such a while to work on people, and newcomers could arrive and be fine for years. However, this clears it all up. Mixed with the water, it must take a while to build up, and its effects don't happen right away. It also explains why a lot of its attacks happen near the sewers and connected to water, beyond being connected to the sewers in general. But stuff like Georgie getting grabbed at the drain, Will's attack while fishing, Marge in the school bathroom, Lily's bathroom at home, and Bev's bathroom, they're all connected by water. Even stuff like Georgie appearing to Bill in Bill's basement, that was when the basement was flooded. The Barrens is all of course tied to water as well, and it was a great way to add more lore to the creature. Now, the scouts have noticed that the residents of Derry have been a lot more aggressive than usual. We see this later with Hank's attempted assassination, and it supposedly means the cycle's going to end. For now. As mentioned, each cycle has a big bloody event, which then ends that passage. After this, everyone gets to live in peace, and they get quiet for 27 years. 100 if they manage to carry out the ritual of Chud. Now, beyond the 1935 Briley Gang massacre and the 1908 ironworks, I believe the town disappearance, which was compared to Roanoke, that was the event that happened before those two. However, the timeline might be off on that. 1989, of course, never had a big one, as the kids sent Pennywise to sleep before it could put an exclamation mark on that cycle. Then, when they were adults, they also stopped it as well, so those two cycles didn't have a massacre. Now, as we learn, the natives call the event
The augury.
Exactly.
This was an ancient practice of observing birds in Roman times. People would work out what their patterns could mean for future events, and it can also mean an omen or a prophecy. Pennywise also appeared as birds when it first came to Earth, so it makes sense that they'd give that name to it. Native Americans believed in stuff like thunderbirds and lots of different events like this, which often signaled what was going to come. So I do appreciate that Muschietti tied it in with that. Again though, they're completely off with it being a mild time, and that future event is, definitely going to be the black spot. Now this is sort of kind of a spoiler. The channel is called Heavy Spoilers, may what you expect. But yeah, this was shown 4 weeks ago, and we have seen an image of Pennywise in the Weeks Ahead trailer that shows him at a fire with a massive cleaver. The last person we saw with a cleaver was Mr. Kersh, and as we know, his wife's giving Hank the wank. So I do wonder if Hank will end up hiding at the black spot and Mr. Kersh will come and burn it down. He will then be revealed to be Pennywise and will have taken over Mr. and Mrs. Kersh in the process. We do know that Mrs. Kersh is a Pennywise form down the line, and if our theories about her being the young clown at the fair are correct, then it has taken on a form of her father, and also potentially her husband. Again, we will discuss this more in our spoiler section, as the mid-season trailer reveals quite a lot at what's going to come. What do you think this is? Heavy spoilers? Either way, Rose is informed that Daniel's been taken, as no one could stop him from heading to the dig site. I mention it every week, but just in case you missed it, I do think that Daniel is the elderly Native American character who teaches Mike the ritual of Chud in Chapter 2. He's kind of taking on the role the elders have here and passing it on to a group that can then go and stop Pennywise. We also know from Chapter 2 that the last ones who tried it ended up failing, so that tribe was destroyed because of it. So we could see these characters attempt the ritual should things get worse and ultimately fail to pull it off. We then see poor Hank be taken to Shawshank. But I'm not a rapper. There's a horde of protesters who are out for blood as he's being put into the bus to the infamous prison. This is led by Chief Bowers, which is kind of a twist on the book. In that, Bowers burned down the Hanlon farm chicken coop and was then fined because of it. He refused to pay, so was then threatened with Shawshank, so it's kind of an opposite here. Bowers is sending an innocent black man to jail, rather than Bowers being a white man who's guilty who's being threatened with going there. Does that make sense? As he goes out, you can also spot the father in the back who's mean mugging Hank. He's wearing a red shirt, and this is of course a colour of Pennywise. In our Chapter 1 breakdown, we talked about how this showed when Pennywise had fully infected someone. For example, when Henry turned bad, he wore red. He then went to his red mailbox, which had a red balloon on it, and then found a red box inside of it. He then took the knife and went and killed his father, and it's sort of like how the guy here is trying to kill Hank. Alvin Marsh also rocks a red undershirt during his attack on Bev, and he was also seen sitting in a red chair. So yeah, this is tying into what the girl said, and he's now under the villain's spell and adding to the violence. Sadly though, the bus isn't the same one that we see in the Shawshank movie. However, as we noted last week, Hank having an affair with a married woman is like a reverse of Annie Dufresne. The father then rushes them, and this seems to be Phil and Susie's dad.
You're a fry for what you did to my kids.
Now, this might be a reach, but it did remind me of Lee Harvey Oswald's assassination. He killed JFK just the year after this show takes place, and was then shot by Jack Ruby while in police custody. Did he kill JFK? Comment below, let me know. I assumed too much there. Or am I being a crazy conspiracy theory? Comment below, let me know. Make the comments, boost engagement, hit the thumbs up, subscribe. Now Fry is also the same thing that was written on Ronnie's locker, which is something that kept reminding me of the Green Mile. which is another king story. I like how Charlotte's also wearing yellow here, and yellow sits near the top of the colour wheel, and if you follow it clockwise, it then shifts into red. So she's basically sitting on the complete opposite side of being affected by the groundwater. And I did wonder if they did the same thing with the tent Maddie was in to kind of misdirect the audience. We then see the creepy police officer who's heavily sweating, and he has that creepy smile. We've seen this before in the supermarket where that man was following Lilly around. There was also the librarian like this in chapter 1, and it's a sign Pennywise is close. Now I do hope they explain the plot hole that Pennywise can attack people in the town despite being in a prison. But yeah, it's possibly because of the groundwater, or maybe he's just moving under the barrens because of the sewer system. And yeah, I'm hoping there's a big twist where it's revealed the stones don't actually do anything, they do nothing. And instead, it's simply been tricking the tribe into thinking that they have control, when really it's been going under the sewers and getting about the town that way, completely undetected. Either way, I do feel like the boundary will be broken by the army in the series, and then Pennywise will be able to move about freely in the 80s, which was one of the worst periods in the entire run. Next we see Charlotte on the phone, and she ends the call as Leroy arrives. I'm not exactly sure who she's talking to, but she does mention getting the papers for Leroy's defense. I do wonder if it's someone in the movement though that she mentioned last week, as we do hear about the race protests on TV in the very next scene. And it doesn't really sound like anyone we've heard about before. Leroy also has to come clean and tell Charlotte what's going on, and it is kind of funny as all 3 members of the family have now encountered Pennywise. So I don't know if it was all Leroy's fault, love. Sounds like you were seeing it as well. You can't blame good old Leroy. However, if they move to the base, then poor old Will won't be able to see his friends anymore, which...
What? What'd I miss?
Oh, never mind then. Rose then visits Shaw, and we learn just how he remembered everything. Last week we could see he was clearly lying, as he had kept the slingshot. Now, he does say that he was given a drug during a medical, which led to him remembering everything. I think the guy must have been like Agent K in Men in Black 2. Just all came flooding back, and absolute nightmare fuel. I do wonder if that drug was part of MK Ultra though, as that infamous experiment was going on in 1957. There was also the army trying to train psychic soldiers, which was documented in The Men Who Stare at Goats. This clearly also influenced a betrayal of Dick, and they're bringing in lots of these real world events. He then went on to use that memory to attempt to use the evil in the woods to keep America safe again. It's something he's been thinking about his whole life, and might be something that was inspired by his father, who was also a soldier. Sadly, we learn that Shaw broke his promise and see a flashback to when they were young. Shaw asks what was in the woods, and Rose says, "Can you keep a secret?" But yeah, I think when you've got the army involved, mate, you clearly broke your promise. Rose is horrified though and says it can't be controlled. She says if he remembered everything, he would run and not try and use it to defeat the Russians. Because yeah,
not a great plan.
However, they know everything due to breaking into Daniel's mind. Rose knows they need all the help they can get though, and decides to aid them in taking down the creature. Interestingly, it also appears that Dick didn't get all the info out of Daniel's head. He says, now Rose says, I know, before Fuller demands they speak in English. Now, I did wonder what this was about, which takes us to theater.
We brought it back, motherfucker, third time. Shit, you ain't shit. Motherfucker ain't got theories like this.
So personally, I think they haven't learned about the ritual of Chud, which is what the Native Americans might secretly try and do. This would not only stop its reign for 100 years, but it would also mean that the army can't use it. This ritual is highly dangerous though, which is why they don't often attempt it. Again, as we know, it does fail for the tribe, but they might succeed at something else. In the book, the Losers Club discover there's eggs in Pennywise's lair, and it turns out that it is pregnant. They end up destroying these, and thus no offspring can be born. This could be the group's true plan. Rose then hands over the dagger. The fact it's a dagger as well could also mean that she wants him to go down and basically stab and kill it. All the army thinks about is how they can be used as a cage, but that cage can also be used as a weapon. And potentially, down the line, Daniel will try and kill it. He faces a much tougher task than his ancestors though, as he has to interact with Pennywise while also be taken there by hostile soldiers. So it's very challenging, but the army don't know everything. Now when she went into the safe, I was kind of hoping we'd see the ritual of Chud vessel that was shown in the movies, especially as Mike's story of how he got it was quite funny. The ritual hasn't been mentioned yet though, but this might be something that's attempted towards the end of the season. I do kind of feel like most of the characters are going to die in the ritual, and the whole season does kind of feel like it's going to end on a bum note. Rose also mentions how the military has inspected the dagger, and Fuller takes it until the next morning. I just find it funny though that Rose trusts him so much that she assumes he'll hand it back the very next day.
Now give it back. Give what back?
Personally, I don't doubt that they'll also try and make a weapon out of it. However, by the end of the episode, Lilly has it, but they must have scanned it or something. I don't know, I'm kind of going off track, so we're going to end theory time there. Let's end the theory time.
Dumb motherfucker, the theory time brings all the girls love theory time. Shake your titties down to the floor.
Now, that is the perfect time to mention our merch store below the video. Step right up. We've got this Deadlights Pennywise shirt based off the poster for the thing. We've got this Derry balloon one for all your troubles. Oh boy, we got this Pennywise one as well. I tell you what, you're such a great guy. I love you. I'll throw in this shirt as well. This Vecna one from Stranger Things is gonna be all the rage. Got a crazy deal. You buy more, you get more of a discount. I said you buy more, you get more of a discount. The more shirts you buy, the more of a discount you get. Video's completely gone off track, but then we see his Will's taken to the base. There's a grimly ironic sign that says, peace is our profession, and it doesn't really feel that much more safe. Especially as this is where the experiments are going to happen, and it'll be ground zero if they manage to capture the creature. Lilly then arrives at her friend's house, and we get another theory confirmed, motherfucker. She is in fact Mrs. Kersh. Sorry Stanley, but someone else is tenderizing your wife's meat. I love how this further connects Bev and Lilly though, as both of them were girls who spoke to kids via a plug hole and also visited Mrs. Kersh's home. Both girls also only had one parent and serious daddy issues. They were also somewhat outcasts at school that were bullied by the other girls and went to the cubicle in order to get sanctuary. That last one might be a bit of a reach, but they have both been in toilet cubicles. They do go to the toilet, I can confirm that. Now, the last 3 months, mate, I've basically had the audiobook on repeat whenever I go for a walk or anything. And I still haven't finished it because the book's fucking massive, mate. Now, but I've been through it already, and on my second go, I hit a section I'd totally forgot about. There are actually some other clues that this is Mrs. Kersh due to what it says in the novel. There it's revealed Mrs. Kersh worked at the hospital and she was even the head housekeeper, making that another hint if you have time to go through the entire book for one episode. Mr. Kersh then arrives and it seems like he's a complete 180 to how he was in The Butchers. Gone is a smiling, friendly Stan the Cleaver, and instead we have a guy drinking, demanding that his steak be cooked right. I do suppose though that we did see how he was willing to let a kid get the crap kicked out of him, and they just simply said boys will be boys. So he's clearly not adverse to violence. He looks ominous though, much like how Pennywise whenever he appears as humans. Other than Matty, obviously. Now when we broke down that episode, we did comment how he might be the clown, and this was due to the red meat packets that he served things up in. Instead though, seeing how he acts here, and not to excuse people for being dickheads, but I think he's a clear victim of the town who's been turned this way because of Pennywise infecting the groundwater. Clearly though, it's affected his personality, and this has made Mrs. Kersh run to Hank, who we learn she's having an affair with. She's also wearing red on her apron, and she wore the same colour last week. As we mentioned, it's a colour of the clown, and humans corrupted by it often wear red. So potentially, this might even be a form of Pennywise that's here to destroy Lilly, much like the reveal with Maddie. However, the fact she doesn't want Lilly to go down into the sewers likely means that that's not the case. If it is Pennywise though, this might be a master plan. If that's the case, I think Mrs. Kersh's real endgame is to make sure the fire at the black spot actually goes ahead. I feel like she'll usher Hank towards it, Stan and his goons may arrive, try and burn the place down, and yeah, we'll talk about it more during the spoiler section. But yeah, it's a way they could take the series, and with twist upon twist in this episode, it's in the realm of possibility. Now back with Will, we see he's eager to ditch the barracks and meet back up with his friends. Charlotte lets him go for a walk, but he sneaks out, and I was like, what? The security at this base must be this guy. Charlotte is instantly distracted by the news though, that reports on Hank's accidental escape. The bus has crashed, and it's only going to make things worse for him. I did wonder if this was some intervention by Maturin or even Pennywise to further play into the plan to rile the town up. I did even think we might see the guard from before was the one who was driving it, but unfortunately that doesn't get confirmed. Either way, the news also reports that there's a gas leak on Neibolt and Redder. This is a cover for the mission into 29 Neibolt Street, which is where we go to next. It sits atop Pennywise's lair and was a major location in the book. The text actually says if any house in Derry is haunted, then that's what it is, and it looks exactly the same as how we saw it in chapter 1 and 2. Now, a detail I love is how this house has stayed exactly the same throughout the decades, and it almost appears as immortal as Pennywise. kind of hinting to how it's undisturbed, and even though they should rip it down, everyone's unable to. I feel like anyone who gets close or tries to do that will be attacked by the clown, and thus it's remained in place just like this, completely dilapidated for decades and decades. Outside we also have an old-timely car from the 20s, which was also there in chapter 1 and 2. You think someone would have moved it in like the 100 years that it's been there, but the fact it's still there highlights how this home has stayed the same forever. In the book, Richie and Eddie sneak into it after Eddie was offered a blowjob by a leper. I'm not joking. Bill basically figured he could go and get his father's gun and they could rock up to the house and shoot the creature in the head. That was the first plan they come up with.
Not a great plan.
Upon arriving, they noticed glass was all about the garden, and this showed that something had broken out instead of into it. Upon getting into the basement, they then saw a werewolf and immediately shit their pants and left. This was then adapted into the movie where the Losers Club faced their first loss. And it doesn't really go well for the army here either. Leroy and Dick are being sent into the house and Fuller briefs the teams. It's called Operation Neibolt, and you can see a lot of names on the board. I googled all these names, couldn't find any except one who for Unit 4, Craven. That might be a reference to Joel Craven, who was the first assistant art director on the show. Fuller also mentions how the house was built atop an old well that dates back to colonial days. This of course matches up with the story about Pennywise's origin last week. As we know, the natives lived in an uneasy peace with Pennywise as it was trapped inside a prison. Then the settlers came, wandered into the woods, and ended up feeding the evil being. This was also played up more in a deleted scene in chapter 1. When Ben's at the library, he looks up at a picture, and we can see a woman holding her baby over the well. Oh, she's great mother there. Well, she's not, mate, and I'll tell you why. Pennywise actually said if she handed over this kid, that it would then spare the village and leave them alone. And go live happy lives. It then ate the child, but this scene was deemed too graphic to show in the film. But yeah, history's repeating itself. The descendants of those natives have warned the military not to go in, and despite that, they're still going in. The troops also wear red lights on their uniforms, and they of course look like Pennywise's balloons. So really nice bit of costume design there. As they go in, they come across that well from the painting, which has the entire house built over it. This is what Pennywise first descended down into after the initial confrontation at Neibolt Street, and it's what the Losers Club later went into. This scene is sort of repeated here as we have the army descending using ropes just like the kids in chapter 1. It's also where they pushed Henry Bowers down into, and later he washed out just like how Dick does. The sewer system's also something that King based on the real life sewer project in Bangor, Maine. We can also see that Pennywise isn't there yet as the dagger isn't glowing. And it kind of works like Sting from Lord of the Rings. Dick's grandmother then calls him, and she kind of sounds like what your grandmother calls out for in the night.
Dick.
Now, I don't think this is a Pennywise trick, but actually her trying to save her grandson. Dick helped Danny from beyond the grave in Dr. Sleep, and she may be doing a similar thing. Now, the group end up going a different way to the Losers Club and drop down into some waist-high water. This was too high for the kids to pass through, so they ended up going into the sewers another way. There's a big drop, and the sewers this time have much more water than we saw in chapter 1. However, in chapter 2, they did go a different way, which had deeper water and led them to its true lair, which was behind that fairy tale door. Whereas the soldiers drop down normally, Dick decides to plunge into it. We then see him submerged into a great body of water, and I think this represents his mind and his memories. He swims towards a hole glowing with a bright light, and it turns out to be a plug hole in the bathtub. Plug holes have played a major part in the franchise, and it's where the dead spirits often cry out from. If this bathroom looks familiar, it's also what Dick saw in his mind when witnessing his grandmother last week. It's also another Dr. Sleep reference, as Danny was afraid of the bath lady in room 217 or 237 in the movie. Now in Dr. Sleep, Dick taught Danny how to lock these spirits away in his mind through a box, and this is pretty much what Danny spent the first part of Dr. Sleep doing. Dick's worst fears then shown in the scene as we meet his grandfather. Absolutely love this, you know, if you've been keeping up with our breakdowns. I've kind of talked about his grandfather being a big part of Dick's past, but I never thought they'd bring him to the show. But yeah, it was a big omission from Dr. Sleep that when you read the book, you're like, oh, this would be so cool to see. And having it brought to life in screen, albeit in Welcome to Derry, was a great way to take his character and quite an interesting aspect of him that often gets overlooked. Now in Dr. Sleep, basically Dick's entire backstory is laid out in a couple of chapters. There we learn he was born in New Hampshire during 1918, and living with his parents, he'd often get visited by his grandparents. They were referred to as white grandma and black grandpa, and not because of their skin colour, you fucking racist. This was because of the colour of their souls, with his grandfather Andy being a wicked, wicked man. He would sexually abuse Dick and mentally torture the family. There's a great scene that describes dinner with the family where he basically comes in, sits down, and everyone is just so afraid no one will speak up. He mentally tortures them, but they're just paralyzed by fear that he might lash out and hurt one of them. It also talks about the gun he proudly has popping out of his waist, which is something we see here as well. And yeah, Muschietti bringing this across was just amazing attention to detail. Now, when Andy died, Dick thought he'd get some reprieve, but he ended up appearing in his room in the night as a ghost. This showed the torment might end up being eternal, and thus his grandmother showed him how to lock spirits away in a mental box, which Andy walks in the room carrying. It's pretty similar in design to how I imagined it in the book, where it describes it as being padlocked with a chain and a key around Dick's neck that can open it. This actually feels like it might be a reference to Bev, who also had a key around her neck during chapter 1. This was brought up in the book, and they discussed how it was due to her parents often being at work. She needed a key to get in and out the house and used it to get the boys in to clean up the blood in the bathroom. Bev and Matty were also abused by their dads, and this key was used to show they were neglectful and that their parents were not really around. I do feel like the fact that both parents were abusive is something that ties them together, and they've purposely brought across this key to kind of show the similarities between the characters. Now, Andy says that power like this is meant to be used.
Power like this is meant to be used.
This is just like what Dick's trying to do by helping Shaw capture it. This moment feels like a real fork in the road for Halloran because he's been using his powers in a way that, though not exactly evil, is definitely misguided. Power is something that Ben also couldn't get out of his head after they thought they defeated Pennywise at Neibolt Street. It's a great section where he talks about what power is, and basically power can be used for great things, but it can also be used to inflict fear. So I think this might be a real turning point for Dick, in which we see him turn his power towards helping others like Danny. And yeah, there's a big group of vulnerable kids wandering around right now who could use some help from an adult, so yes, this could be a turning point. But yeah, doing that as opposed to like following orders for the army to inflict pain on people like Daniel, who again was just trying to do the right thing. We also see as his grandmother warns him throughout the scene via her mind that it's all just a trick, which his grandfather's annoyed about.
Talking to each other with your minds, keeping secrets from me.
In The Shining, Dick of course says,
My grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths.
Which is a really great callback. Now, I don't think his grandmother's Pennywise, however, I think it's clear that his grandfather's the clown. And he then shoots his grandmother on the leg, and he does that smile and even drools, the exact same as Pennywise. One of the eyes is also looking at the wall, just like the evil clown tends to do. The lock then goes off, and everything's unleashed, which is when Dick tries to cover his ears. Dick is in far over his head here, and all of the spirits are now breaking free. Now, I did have some theories about what exactly this is, and that does kind of contradict the books, but yeah, here's what it is. Let's get into it. Okay, so at the end, Dick climbs out the sewers and then spots Paulie. So it did make me wonder if this entire experience is what unlocked his ability to see the dead. Though that stuff with his grandfather's ghost was in Doctor's sleep, they may be changing the canon and saying before this point he couldn't see ghosts and him appearing as a ghost never happened. As of yet though, he hasn't seen ghosts in the show, and Welcome to Derry may expand upon the box's mythology. With that in mind as well, in a place as deadly as Derry, Dick might see the Bradley Gang massacre and the Kitchener Ironworks. Now I had thought it's a bit weird that they're doing season 1 in the 60s and then going back to the 30s and 1908 for season 2 and 3. Because yeah, you're kind of starting at the season 3 story and then working backwards. I'm not sure how much more we can even learn from Shaw's past and the 30s, because it's like, there is enough information there for you to kind of fill in the blanks. And also, like, this feels like we're building towards stopping Pennywise, so going backwards and talking about how they didn't stop him, it's a bit weird. And yeah, even beyond that, I think it's a shame that we'll say bye to characters like Dick and Lilly and basically start season 2 with a whole new group. So what I'm hoping is that Dick unlocks this new ability, and we keep the same characters for season 2 and 3, and then, through using his mind, getting flashbacks, seeing ghosts and stuff, this is where we learn about the 30s and 1908. And yeah, having each season focus on a certain event while keeping these characters, having them see the past through psychic abilities, personally I think that's the best way to tell the story. Meanwhile at the standpipe, Lilly and Marge then arrive and the ex-Patty Cake wants to join the gang. You've signed up at a really great time, love, as Lilly wants them to go down into the sewers and save her friends. She also says they can't go back to the police.
And we can't make Maddie go to the police. What?
I love the little smirk by Pennywise there, and it's clearly playing into the creature's hand. He then says he won't go though, which is another great misdirect. Also, I might be reaching, so well, stretch a bit, but the cloud over Lilly's shoulder, it looked like a face to me. As we've discussed in numerous Pennywise videos, he often appears watching the characters, but yeah, it's just something that stuck out to me. We also see as Lily's managed to swipe more pills from her mum.
You wanna get high?
It popped lots of them before going to the sewers, and yeah,
Not a great plan.
I need to stop using that meme, but it's pretty applicable for the whole episode. Now Lilly wins her friends over by asking if they're an anchor or a lifeboat. One pulls you down while the other keeps you afloat. It fits the water themes of the franchise, especially the floating pod, and even It Chapter 1, of course, starts off with building a boat. Ronnie, Lilly and Rich then say they're lifeboats, but you might notice that Matty never replies, which is another clue that he's indeed the clown itself. Will then arrives panting and out of breath, having clearly just run from the base. Now, while Halloran's currently in his worst nightmare, the airmen with him are attacked by it. I love the shape of the tunnel it comes out of, and this in itself appears like a balloon. Firstly, we see a long bony hand, which you think is the clown's. However, it's Uncle Sam, and it says, "I want you," to hit the thumbs up. Now this is of course inspired by the US recruitment poster. This in itself was inspired by the Lord Kitchener poster for World War I. It then attacks and completely wipes out the soldiers, and being lost and scared in the sewers is just a recipe for disaster. In Chapter 1, Stanley got split up from his mates and was almost eaten by the painting lady, and Leroy and Paulie then hear it as the rest of the kids make their way to the sewers. If you're a fan of the franchise, then you'll instantly recognise this shot composition, and it's identical to the one they use in Chapter 1 and 2. Now in Chapter 1, it's shown just after Mike joins the Losers Club, and it signifies the group are finally united together. This happens right after the rock fight, which is the first time that the group beat Bowers. So they're united as one, and just like the train moving behind them, their different carriages are now joined up and moving together in the same direction. Everyone is a united force now, and though they have differences, they're on the same track, headed to the same destination. Which was always a great touch, and I'm so glad they referenced this shot in the show. Ditching their bikes, they then head to one of the tunnels, which is just like what Bill and his mates did when they were looking for Georgie. However, this appears to be a different entrance, and it seems to be where Dick comes out of at the end. They then drop a mad load of pills while Daniel leads the soldiers through the tunnels. The network is massive, and most of the records were lost. So no one really knows how far they go. The book constantly talks about how many people got lost down there, and eventually people just stopped going to the sewers. Everyone who did disappeared or came out shaken, and thus it kind of became off limits. Plus, you had to go through that rundown house on Neibolt Street to do it, and yeah, that's why it's in such bad shape in the first place, because no one wants to go there. We then see as Daniel makes a break for it, and Fuller just instantly calls for everyone to shoot. Yeah mate, kill the one guy who can keep you safe and find it.
Not a great plan.
The dagger then gets dropped in the chaos as the kids descend further into the tunnels. I love how the tunnels all look the same, and this really adds to the tension and claustrophobia. It's here that the kids then realise they took far too many pills and really start to space out. Marge holds Rich's hand, which is the kid's dream, and I cracked up when he had a massive smile when asked what they were doing. No, you'll never walk alone though. Which is a shame, Mushieti, I'm docking your point. Meanwhile, Leroy and Paulie are lost. Paulie's terrified and complaining about the heat, whereas Leroy's pretty chill due to him not feeling fear. Charlotte appears, but Paulie can't see her, which sets up the reveal that it's in fact the real Will later on. As Leroy doesn't feel any fear, he's also beyond calm when shooting his own wife in the head, except for the jump scares at the end. But he clearly is believing he's shooting her, which is why it manages to work. This is something that Bill also does in 1989, even though the bolt gun is said to be empty. But it still works because Bill believes it, just like how Leroy believes it here. The figure also runs at Leroy the same way Pennywise runs in Chapter 1 and 2, namely during the Patrick Hockstetter death. In another nod to that character, the kids then reach a dead end just like Patrick. He was chased into the sewers and met a grim fate. Just before being attacked, he also found corpses floating in the water, and they appear just like the reveal here. The Losers Club also discovered them later in the movie, and it nicely played off the scene in that film. And yeah, if you wander into somewhere and there's like loads of dead kids' bodies floating about, probably not a good place to be, mate. Probably in the lion's den right there.
Not a great plan.
It's very disturbing as we see each of the kids, and Matty Wise starts to sing. This is the song that was used in the Red Band trailer titled Down with the Clown. No, not related to the Insane Clown Posse tune. Ayo, woo woo! Lastly, the real Matty rises with a key around his neck. It's haunting, and seeing him dead, yeah, just instantly the penny drops and you realise it's Pennywise. The transformation's top notch, and it's the first time seeing Bill Skarsgård properly in the season. Even got little rays of lights behind him, they all glow. The kids then sprint out of there, and Lilly ends up being separated from the others. Just like Stanley in Chapter 1, Will screaming and running is just like the vision of Charlotte, and Paulie sacrifices himself to save Leroy's son. It's a shame, as I did like the character, but hey, at least you'll probably get to come back as a ghost. I do wonder if Leroy will be reprimanded because of this though, and we do know that he leaves the army to go and start a farm. In the book, Will was the soldier, and he left it after the fire at the Black Spot. We see Leroy getting interviewed at the end, and I don't know if they're going to believe him because Shaw says he does have some questions. Leroy just says that Paulie got hit and was bleeding, rather than saying it was by his own hand.
I do still have a few questions of my own. I'm sorry.
Yeah, mate, we know. I've got bloody questions about you, mate. I've got some questions about your plan. Shaw says the natives will answer for what they led them into, but yeah, read the room, mate. Plan ain't gonna fucking work, mate. Don't make me do the not a great plan again, mate. Leroy's son meddling in things he shouldn't have done, though, did sort of lead to Paulie's death, and I do wonder if it's gonna push a further strain on their relationship. In Chapter 1, Leroy also told Mike that he could be the one firing the bolt gun or the one on the other side of it. Sort of like what happens between him and Paulie. In staying in Derry, I do wonder if the Groundwater might twist how he views this event, as he could see it differently. Lilly then reaches another dead end and is again about to meet the same fate as Patrick. The soundtrack is sublime here though, and Bill Skarsgård truly delivers as Pennywise. And yeah, I know it took 5 weeks to see him, but just to reveal as Matty and then some of these scenes, well worth the wait. He calls her such a good friend and then transforms into her sliced father when he says such a bad daughter. The kids' biggest fears are seeing their parents all twisted and evil, and in the book, Mike visits his dad in hospital when he has cancer. After his death, Mike says the most scary thing that Pennywise could appear as wouldn't be like a giant bird or something, it would be his father's cancer-stricken face coming out towards him. Lilly seeing her dad like this is also one of her worst fears, and it then runs at her again, similar to how it rushed Patrick. Luckily for Lilly, the dagger's by her feet and it then begins to glow. It's the only thing that can stop the clown and will play a big part in the kids' plan moving forward. I'm actually surprised that they're kind of retconning these items into the show, as they don't ever come into play with Mike or the Losers Club. So maybe the army collects them all at the base and then Pennywise appears and destroys them all once and for all. I love the way Pennywise faces here all turned up though, and it's just frozen there not knowing what to do, before then transforms back. The glyphs on the dagger are also really interesting and clearly show that there's something out there that inscribed them in the first place, and possibly built the prison that Pennywise was in. Cutting to Mrs. Kersh, she then finds her love in her car. She's wearing a red coat, further playing on the colour and indicating she's quote-unquote Pennywise's daughter. You know, obviously her dad was the actual clown there, so it does work pretty well. I also wonder though if this was a nod to Silent Hill, as there's a nurse who wears a similar thing as well. But yeah, maybe it was just the fashion at the time. Hank initially seems like he's threatening her, but as we learn, the pair are in fact lovers. Eventually they drive off, and I did wonder if this was to the Western Woods. Hank then mentions how something attacked the bus, which just seems incredibly suspicious. However, I did wonder if beyond Pennywise, if it could also be the movement that Charlotte has been speaking to. Kersh then heads to Charlotte, as she's the one who's been helping Hank. Dressed up like Velma and looking damn good too, she arrives and the pair then have a little conversation. Luckily, this is a secluded building away from the main base that's being done up that Hank can now hide in, which yeah, does kind of feel like an endgame. Either way, we see how Dick's made it out. He sees Paulie, who's now a spirit, and we can see that his eyes have gone white. This is exactly how the woman in 217 appeared in The Shining, and how the ghosts were described in Dr. Sleep. They were decomposing and generally grim. We then hear Satan Never Sleeps by Timmy Euro. Very on the nose, as Satan here is Pennywise and he's woken up, but it does sleep. So it does sleep from time to time, but moving on. Anyway, this is the spoiler section part of the video, and if you don't want to know anything that's been shown in the trailers, then please turn off now and hit the thumbs up as well, mate. What's wrong with you? It takes just 2 seconds. What's wrong with you? There's something genuinely wrong with you if you watch this much of a video and you don't hit the thumbs up. Yes, I will admit I never hit the thumbs up myself when watching other videos, but I'm special, you see. Rules for me, not for thee. Now, if they do the crazy big twist and make Kersh Pennywise, then it could be part of a game plan to make sure the fire at the Black Spot happens. She's married and having an affair with a black man, and this is something Hank would get lynched for. Sadly, because of the time, even if he gets exonerated for the cinema massacre, he's still gonna get killed because of that. The mid-season trailer shows the black spot burning down and men with guns outside of it. The latter is no doubt the Legion of White Decency who burnt it down in the book. We heard at the start of the episode how there's a big bloody massacre which ends each cycle, and this is it. With Charlotte meeting Mrs. Kersh, I think she'll sneak Hank into the black spot. Kersh then will reveal it to her husband and the Legion will come for him. Again, Pennywise appears in the Looks Ahead trailer with a cleaver, and Stan, aka Mr. Kersh's nickname, is of course Stan the Cleaver. In the mid-season trailer, Lily's also looking at pictures of Bob Gray as Pennywise, as well as the ones that we saw in Chapter 2. She's then riding her bike down the street screaming, possibly realising that the only nice adult in Derry is actually an eldritch demon that's thousands of years old. We've all been there, love, you should say my mother-in-law. Ba-bum-cha. There's also a black and white scene in the Looks Ahead trailer that shows what looks like a nurse or a housekeeper. So maybe that is the real Mrs. Kersh and Pennywise stole her body and then started to appear as her. The trailer also shows us what happens to Dick and we catch him drinking while holding a gun. Alcohol actually stops Shine users from seeing ghosts, and in Dr. Sleep, Danny turned to the bottle hard. With his box open up, he's going to need a hell of a lot of whiskey, but yeah, I feel like Hank will hide at the black spot, and then Pennywise will reveal a location to the town. The gang will then arrive and burn it down with all the patrons and Hank inside. This actually led to the death of 66 people and was the big massacre that ended things and potentially this season as well. But anyway, that's it for this episode, and it's another solid entry with some shocking spooks, big shocking twists, and I was shocked throughout because they keep using these shit plans. They're not great plans, mate. Stop doing it. But yeah, we will be back next week to talk about where it goes next, and in the meantime, drop a comment with all your thoughts below. If you want to follow us on Instagram as well and see what I'm buying myself at the moment, buying like books someday, model cars someday, lots of different stuff, check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos every single week? If you click the join button, you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else, and it costs just 99 cents a month. At the moment, we have It Chapter 1, which is out for members. We'll be releasing soon publicly, I think in about a week's time, but yeah, if you want to see that early, 99 pence a month, you get at least one video a week, I promise you that. Now, if you want something else to watch, you've got a breakdown on screen right now going over lots of other things that we've talked about on the channel. If not though, huge thank you for sitting through this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care and don't have nightmares. Peace.